Alright, welcome back to the Lua introduction, and in this lecture we're going to talk about if and else statements. Now, we've seen in the last lecture that we can take Boolean values and both compare different variable types and get Boolean values out of that, and then we can take Boolean values and then we can chain them together with the logical operators. And now what we're going to see is how we can use this in order to change the program flow. So everything we've seen before is that everything that happened was the program started at the top of the script and just ran down and executed each line, well, one after the other. Now we can actually put forks in the road, so to speak, and say, well, if a certain thing happens, then execute this. If that doesn't happen, then execute that. And this is what we're going to look at. First is the if statement. And for that, we just type if, and then a Boolean expression. So we can either write, for example, is course good, or we can write a Boolean expression. First of all, we're going to write a Boolean expression with x is bigger than y. Now, as we can see up here, x is 100 and y is 1000. So this is actually false. After the Boolean expression, we want to write then, and then we hit enter. And then this end here is going to be generated automatically. And everything inside of here, including the indent, is what happens inside if this is true, right? Now in this case, we know that this is not true, but we're going to write in here, print x is bigger than y, right? And of course, if we run this, nothing happens, right? And that's actually great because that's what we wanted to see, because x is not bigger than y. But we can add something else, and that is exactly the keyword that we want to use, and that is else. So if we go back here and write else, and then everything that happens now here, in between the else and the and statement, that happens if this is not the case. So this happens if this is true, and everything here happens if this is false. So here we can write in print x is not bigger than y. And if we run this, we're going to see this actually gets printed out, because this one was false, and so we actually go in here. But we can also do this, like I said, instead of using the relational operator of equal, bigger, we can also use just a normal Boolean. So for example, is good course, and this is actually also being suggested here. We can just hit tab or enter to autocomplete this, and then we can say then, and then let's say, for example, yeah, it's a pretty good course. And this is one way to write it, right? So we can just write the Boolean expression. We can also write it like this. So this is if is good course equals true, then print out, for example, still really good. For example, this is both correct, so we can either just put the Boolean variable in there, or we can explicitly state, hey, is this equal to true? Both of those work. This comes down to style, really, and what you prefer. If you prefer this one, then use this one. If you prefer this way of writing if statements, take this one. But it's good to stick with one or the other, and then stick with this everywhere you write code. I personally like this one more, but like I said, some people like the explicitly stated, hey, I want to know if this is true or not. But that's just, it's basically exactly the same thing, just written a little differently. And you will find this sometimes with scripting and programming, that there are certain things that you can do where you have multiple ways of doing it, or it comes down to simply using a way and sticking with it. But yeah, that's just a short little thing there. And then there's one more thing, and that is, for example, well, let's say we had that x here, that's 100, and let's say, well, let's imagine maybe the x is a test rating or a test score, and if it's smaller than 50, well, then we're going to print out, let's say, fail, because, yeah, well, you failed if it's less than 50. And then we want to say, well, now we want to look if it's between 50 and 100, and then when it's 100, we actually want to print out a special message. And how do we do that? Well, instead of just doing an else, we can also do else if. So just written together as one word. And the else if one actually expects another if statement after it. So in this case, we would want it to be x is bigger or equal to 50, right? So it's at least 50 or bigger, and x should be smaller than 100, right? And then what we want to have happen is we want to print out, for example, past, and then here we have another else statement. Now this else statement actually belongs to this if statement. And this if statement here is, this else statement belongs to there. So that's basically how this works. And now here in this else, this is now being run. So let's say here, print, past with honors, let's say, for example. Something like that. Then what happens is if x is smaller than 50, this is going to be printed out. If x is between 50 and 99 in this case, or smaller than 100, then past gets printed out. And if it is exactly 100 or bigger, then this gets printed out. Let's see if that works. And of course, we passed with honors, as we all should, very well. And this was basically already the introduction to the if and else statements. Very, very powerful and a basic building block for programming, but a very useful one. However, if there are any questions, you can always feel free to ask. And yeah.